Resentment. In small business employees, it doesn't usually show up like anger. It shows up as compliance. It shows up as silence. It shows up as people doing exactly what you asked and nothing more. And you're probably wondering why all of that is bad. It's bad because small businesses with employees who simply check a box so they don't get fired take much longer to grow. They have these deep underbellies of culture that actually stagnates scalability. It doesn't matter how good the product or service is, employee resentment will inhibit long-term success. And that's why this topic makes leaders really uncomfortable. Not because they're bad people, but because most resentment isn't created by malice. It's created by avoidance. Employees don't usually resent you as a person. They resent the systems you tolerate, the decisions you delay, and the behaviors you excuse. So today, I want to walk you through 3 reasons your employees may resent you, even if they smile, even if they stay, even if you genuinely believe they like you. It's not about being liked. In fact, the leaders who optimize for being liked tend to create the most resentment over time. Let's start there. Many CEOs I talk to say some version of this phrase: my door is always open. Maybe it's I encourage feedback or I want people to speak up. And I believe most of them mean it, or at least they genuinely think they do. But psychological safety is not created by what you say. It's created by what happens after someone challenges you. Employees are constantly running experiments. What happens if I push back? What happens if I disagree? What happens if I name the real issue that no one is talking about? And if they aren't running experiments themselves, they are watching when other employees do. And they adjust their behavior accordingly. If the response is defensiveness, subtle punishment, being labeled as difficult, or simply being ignored altogether, they're not going to argue harder. They're just going to stop talking. That's not trust. That's risk management. Here's a big CEO blind spot in this. We assume that silence means alignment. It doesn't. It sometimes means people decided it's safer to work around you than with you. And resentment grows in that gap. And that resentment turns into back channeling, which is one of the biggest culture killers of a small environment. When employees agree to one thing in a meeting to save face, but then the minute the meeting is over, they are talking about why that won't work or why something else should be the solution. They didn't feel comfortable speaking up, but they also don't feel comfortable doing what was asked. So they don't, at least not well. So the meeting was a waste. You are probably going to spend hours in rework, and that process gets washed, rinsed, and repeated with every other initiative. Here's a question you can ask yourself. When was the last time someone on your team challenged your thinking in a meeting, questioned a decision you were really excited about, or said, I don't think this will work? If you cannot remember, that may not be because your team agrees with everything you do. It may be because they've learned what kind of honesty is allowed. If you can remember, how did you handle it? If you want to truly have an open door policy, thank leaders and employees publicly when they push back or challenge you. Of course, they should do it respectfully, but if you want your open door to be used, thank them for the feedback, even if you don't agree or take their suggestion. Resentment doesn't show up as rebellion. It shows up as disengagement. People stop investing emotionally once they realize the truth isn't welcome. This one is sometimes subtle, sometimes not, and it's incredibly common in small businesses for some reason. They will use languages like, we're a family here. We take care of our own. We're all in this together. Again, it's usually well-intended, and while honestly, I would encourage you to never use language like that, if you insist, know this. when the experience doesn't match the language, meaning decisions get made without context, or changes are announced without explanation, or sacrifices are expected without reciprocity, then resentment begins. Because adults don't want a family at work. They want clarity, they want fairness, and predictability. When you say family but operate transactionally, employees feel emotionally overpromised and operationally under-delivered. So here's what that looks like in practice. We're a family until budgets get tight. Then anybody can go. We're all in this together until leadership bonuses are untouched while nobody else gets one. We care about you, but no transparency when things change and are going to affect your life. From the employee side, it feels manipulative, even if that was never your intent. The resentment comes from the mismatch of the words to the behavior, not the decision itself. Employees can handle hard news. They struggle with inconsistent logic. If loyalty is expected, context is required. If flexibility is requested, trust has to run both ways. Culture is not about closeness, it's about credibility. Do your actions match your language, especially when it's inconvenient? If not, people don't disengage loudly, they disengage quietly. They do what's required, they stop volunteering ideas, they stop giving discretionary effort, and resentment settles in. You've probably heard of quiet quitting. Well, this is it. I tend to be a very transparent leader. My team knows what is going on in this business at all times. I'm transparent with our numbers, our pipeline, the realities of employees leaving. I would much rather share too much than make them feel like I'm keeping things from them or not living the words that I say. And oh, by the way, when you aren't transparent with employees, when you don't tell them something, they don't just feel like there's nothing to share. They make it up. They just make things up and believe those things to be true. That's really an episode all in of itself. This is the place I spend the most time. My expertise inside my fractional HR support firm is in leadership development. It's also in identifying what is affecting the people inside the organization and keeping them from meeting goals. And almost always, it's a bad manager or three of them. And it's the one CEOs rationalize the most. There's almost always someone in the organization who gets results but leaves damage behind. They hit their numbers, but misses people, or even hits people and meets their numbers, misses their numbers. I don't know. You know exactly who I'm talking about. And employees know that you know. When that behavior is tolerated, here's the message employees hear. Results matter more than respect. Performance excuses behavior. Leadership protection is uneven. And resentment skyrockets because now the system feels unfair. You usually tell yourself, I'll deal with it later. They're too valuable right now. That's just their personality. They don't mean any harm. But your team is watching what you do not address, and they draw conclusions. So here's a question you can ask your employees. If you were to ask all of them privately, who is protected here? Would they all name the same person? If yes, that's not a perception problem. That's a leadership decision. People don't leave companies because of one bad manager. They leave because leadership knows they have a bad manager and does nothing about it. Even the high performers, especially the high performers, because they see the cost of staying. I did an earlier episode on this and a whole LinkedIn Live in Q4 of last year if you want more of my thoughts on that topic. But whether you watch those or not, that toxic manager that you know is toxic is absolutely killing your business, whether they are performing or not. Here's what I want to leave you with. Resentment is not a morale issue. It's not an engagement issue, and it's not an HR issue. It's a leadership lag indicator. It shows up when clarity is avoided, accountability is inconsistent, and courage is delayed. Your employees don't need you to be liked. They need you to be clear, consistent, and willing to confront what's uncomfortable. If you want less resentment, stop managing how you're perceived and start managing what you permit. Because culture isn't what you say when things are easy, it's what you're willing to address when it's not.